Hey there, how are you doing? We are going to jump into this whole cleanse business. So right before we do that, I'm just going to introduce you to where I got some of this information from. So I was listening to a podcast, and the author of this book is his name is James Nestor. The title of the book is Breathe. So obviously that was something I would be interested in. And during that podcast, he started talking about the moon cycle and how it was related to breathing. So I bought the book right away and jumped in. So a lot of this is his synthesis of his experiences, and it's kind of crafty the way he's done it. It really appealed to me from an evolutionary perspective with my background in biology and my background in respiratory therapy. It just dovetailed really well and helped me connect some dots. So it gave me a new way to present this to you. So I'm finding in the kind of health wellness space that I play in, I'm noticing people are starting to talk more about breathing and sleeping and things like that, which is fantastic. I don't know that they often give you very concrete information on how to do some things, which is where I hope you're getting some more of that kind of thing here. And if not, let me know, because that's what I want it to be. And so what I did was I just took, the chapters of his book, consolidated them, and created the acronym. So the words that are made up, so the chew, things like that, they're titles in his book. And that's where we're going to start. So we're going to start with chew. And this is a really interesting one. And I think it might blow your mind just a little bit. So we've already talked previously about how our ancestors learned to tenderize and cook food, and that's what it was that fueled our evolution as humans. It allowed our brains to grow, and then it changed the shape of our skulls, which led to our airway obstructions. We've talked about that a little bit already. So let's dive into that a little bit about what happened. So around 1500, that is when farming that had begun in Asia started to take over the world. So along with that, and obviously I'm consolidating this really quickly, the population started to explode. City life was horrible. It was full of disease, lots of infection, plagues were common, and it was the first time in our lives when we could really spend our entire life eating nothing but processed food. So there wasn't a lot of raw, fresh, or natural food available to people, and for lots of reasons. So processing was needed to extend the shelf life of foods and make things more accessible. But the food's really kind of mushy and soft. And sugar also became increasingly common. And really think about it, all that fiber just really lacked, all that food, lacked fiber, vitamins, and other nutrients. None of this is new to anybody that's been in this area and working on this kind of stuff for a while. So as the urban populations grew sicker and smaller, the human face really started to rapidly deteriorate at that point. So here's what everything happened. So our mouths shrank, the facial bones grew stunted. So you started to see more dental disease. Crooked teeth and jaws exploded by like 10 times. It became very common to start having teeth removed to make room for other teeth, and that was my experience. And then along with that, breathing problems skyrocketed. So as the industrialized food was shrinking our mouths and destroying our breathing, it was also linked to deficiencies in vitamin D and vitamin C. And, there are societies that didn't adopt this very modern diet, and they don't have these kind of problems. Now, they're getting to be pretty few and far between out there, but they aren't as nutrient deficient as most of the rest of us are. And it doesn't matter kind of what their diet base is, whether it's animal based or plant based or whatever it is. They're just it's not just about vitamins D and C. So as people sort of gravitated into the cities to avoid all that labor attached to living that kind of farming lifestyle, it's just this combination of that whole industrialization age that happened. And it doesn't completely explain all of the reasons why our mouths were getting smaller. So we talked about, there were some shape changes happening because we weren't, as we already talked about. So the other thing that was kind of really going on with all of this is that with this industrialized, processed, soft, mushy diet, we are lacking the constant stress of chewing. We are. So 95% of our modern diet is really processed food, and it's soft. It's funny, since I was, started digging into this, I noticed this so much now. It's crazy. So our ancient ancestors, they chewed for hours a day. Now that's not necessarily practical for us either, but it has led to issues, and it really, our face has become an obstacle. So let's talk about how we can fix some of these things. So we're going to kind of group it into solutions around our nose and then solutions around our mouth. So, it's hard to change our anatomy, but a saline rinse is a really good option to address common nasal congestion. There's lots of ways that you can get that. And hit me up if you need some more suggestions on those things like neti pots. There's all kinds of different ways. You could try something called balloon sinuplasty. So if you've ever heard of angioplasty, where they take a catheter into the heart area and the vessels that are around the heart, and they can go in and find the areas that are compressed, take the catheter in, they blow up a balloon and try to open up the arteries and all the different vessels that can be in there. The same thing, they can go into your sinuses and do the same type of work. I don't know if this is super common yet, and probably not. It seems like a very viable option for a lot of people. And the other thing that can happen is that our nostrils can be the problem. So they can be too small, they can collapse easily when you inhale, and that's something called nasal valve collapse. Some of the other things that go on, I've got this one as well too. So I'm in the majority, the 3/4 of our population has a deviated nasal septum that is clearly visible to the naked eye. I don't know if you can actually see it, but some people can. And that's when the bone and the cartilage in your nose is just off center. Mine was taking a basketball in the face when I was, 11-ish, something like that. Just happens. Most of us, about 50% of us, are walking around with chronically inflamed turbinates. That's the things up inside our sinuses. And all of this just leads to breathing problems, which leads to an increased rate of infection. And there's surgical options out there too. Just be careful. They can be quite awful afterwards as well too. They can promise a lot of things and cause a lot more issues afterwards. Not all of them, but just do your research if that's something you're looking at. So then let's talk a little bit about some mouth solutions. This is where I've spent a lot of my career. So this is where we're talking about things like sleep apnea, snoring, asthma, ADHD is in here too. There's a lot of links to tonsils and adenoid issues because it's all linked to mouth obstruction. So you have that little uvula, that's that little thing that hangs at the back of your throat, the tongue, and it's the neck circumference that tend to contribute to all the issues that are going on in this area, whether it's inflammation, whether it's things, they're just too big for the anatomy. As we've evolved, our tongues are pretty much too big for our mouth. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. And then just neck circumference, like think football players, especially defensive line, offensive line, they have a high prevalence of sleep apnea because they have that big muscular neck. So it puts a lot of pressure on their airway, collapses it. So if you have been diagnosed with any of these things or around someone that does, you might be familiar with CPAP, which is not the easiest thing to wear. It needs a diagnosis. It's not really a long-term solution because it's something that only works while you wear it. Expanding devices are becoming much more common. You're still seeing lots of teeth extractions and braces. And I think we know that does tend to lead to TMJ or temporal mandibular joint problems. I can tick off every single one of those boxes myself. It's all led to like more obstructions. Our mouths just keep getting smaller. So I know I wouldn't be surprised as well, and they talk about this in the book too, that a lot of traditional orthodontics will probably trend back towards more of the mouth expanding versus necessarily tooth extraction and braces right away. Okay, so let's talk about some kind of interesting things that I don't think we ever really think about. So like we talk about our posture, I talk about this a lot when I'm working with my personal training clients, we're going to talk about oral posture because we have to think about our head as being part of our spine as well too. It's been something I'm working on a lot with my clients too. So oral posture, let's talk about this. So we want to think about keeping our lips together. You would be surprised at how many of us are actually breathing through our mouth without knowing it. You want to have your teeth just lightly touching together and your tongue sitting on the roof of your mouth. So let's talk about the spine a little bit. So when you're sitting or standing, your spine should really form a loose J shape. It's going to have, everybody's spine is a little bit different. It's going to look, slightly different variations of their J, but it just basically means, so think head, neck, kind of into your spine. It's all relatively straight, and then it just kind of juts out a little bit at the bottom, down into your hips and your sacrum down in here. When you're in that position, we want to think about breathing slowly and into your abdomen. Then let's talk about where most of us are through the day. So most of us tend to be very shoulders hunched forward. Our neck is sticking out, so it's more of an S shape versus J, but it's when everything's pulled back in. I'm just going to throw the little thing in here I learned in here from my chiropractor as well. So when you are sitting straight up in this J shape, now I can't remember exactly the numbers, but your skull weighs, say, about 8 pounds, I think it is. So it's transmitting about 8 pounds of weight down into your neck. As you start to slouch and round forward and your head drifts forward, further it goes, they have a name for it, they call it tech neck. That weight that is transmitted down in through your neck and into your shoulders, all this upper area, equates to about, I think it's 45 pounds. From 45 to 8, you're designed for 8. You're not designed for 45. So not just about sitting with the shoulders back, we also want to think about keeping the neck back, keeping that J shape. So lips together, teeth together, tongue at the roof of your mouth. Because there's a reason why we have actually become this S shape. It's because our tongue doesn't fit inside our small mouth. So it tends to fall back into your mouth, which creates a mild suffocation. You may or not be aware of it. You could actually choke and cough while you're sleeping. I've seen that a gazillion times. Then by day, we tend to slope our shoulders forward, stick the neck out and up, because that actually helps open up your airway a little bit. But while that head is up and out, it creates a lot of stress in your back muscles. And then that kink in your neck also affects your brainstem, causing headaches. So throw that out there. All right, another solution in our mouth area, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one because it's a bit weird. They're tongue thrusting exercises. If you want to Google or wherever you are doing your internet searches these days, look for something called mewing. It's really weird. It's odd. But there's lots of things you can dive into if you want to get into some of this kind of stuff. I'm just not going to say a whole lot about it at this point, but it kind of makes a lot of sense just from the name itself. The other thing we want to talk about, and I think this is, this applies across a lot of things, is that we've been told that as we get older, we lose bone mass. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's the same in our face. The bones grow from stem cells. We don't lose access to those. So the bones in the middle of our face are more plastic, more pliable, so we can grow new bone in our face. And the way to do that is by stimulating your stem cells so that they're actually there producing bone. And the way to do that is through your masseter muscle. And that's this big muscle that's in your jaw. All you need to do, and again, take this with a grain of salt. You don't want to give yourself headaches and a lot of stress either. So just in moderation, just want to clamp down on your back molars. And it's like the chewing that our ancestors used to do for hours. So we don't necessarily have that opportunity to chew that kind of food. It's just, it's just not possible. But it just, it stimulates that chewing and it will help expand. There's been studies doing things with expanders and things like this, and they've shown that you can regrow bone in not just kids, in adults in 6 months. So it's not too crazy. It's just a little out there. It's not stuff that a lot of people are really talking about. It's not very common knowledge. It's not something I learned about in school. It's just marrying my experience and new learnings together and bringing them to you. So hopefully that one was interesting. We will move on to the next one in our cleanse series in the next video. I'll see you there.